this evening. We truly do appreciate your time and commitment to participating in this initiative to help develop a sustainable and local economic development plan. We're sorry. Oh, okay. We're also very grateful for all of those that have participated and contributed to date. There's been a ton of engagement and it's been incredibly useful. We've heard some amazing ideas and insight on how to support and advance the economy of Bowen. And I'm sure there's much more for us to learn. So even though this is our sort of final in-person or Zoom engagement, there's still many opportunities to continue to learn and grow. Through this process, we've been pleased that some of what we are hearing is actually and essentially validating many of the things that we've already come to understand. So I don't imagine that this planning work will uncover any great big surprise that none of the well-informed and highly engaged participants have already thought of. But there certainly are some golden nuggets that we are uncovering along the way. And I think the most important piece of all of this is that we're actually doing this together. It's a collaboration and it's being done in a very respectful way. And I've really appreciated all of the amazing ideas and collaborative approach that has been taken so far. And I wanted to also be clear that there's not going to be any significant economic course correction for Bowen Island without it being driven and led by the community in and of itself. So I just want to thank all of you for spending some of your valuable time on this beautiful summer evening with us, and we really do appreciate it. So thank you all, and I'll hand it over to Vince.
I'm going to pop that those slides back up. So I'm hoping everyone can see the agenda slide. So thank you, Liam, for the blue line welcoming people. I'm going to talk about the guidelines to make this session work. It's a little complex given the number of people, but we'll do some simple steps that'll work and some background on how we got here. And then my colleague, David Van Cedars, will open the floor for the discussions for the rest of the session. So it's mostly an open discussion. Trying to get that to move forward. So in terms of how we're going to run the session, one quick slide. You can keep your camera on or off. Most microphones will be silenced during the session because we get a lot of background noise and that interferes. And also we have to manage the hands up, I'd like to speak thing with so many people. You can imagine it's a little complex. So I'm hoping you're all familiar with the chat box function within Zoom and that you can find it and open it. What we're going to use chat function, the chat is for two functions. First, David, when he presents on his research and his summary or his analysis of review of all the material that's been provided by everybody to date, which is not finished, we'll be providing some prompting questions. Given this, I'd like to ask a question that, so you're kind of an audience for him. And if you'd like to respond to one of his questions, if it inspires you, prompts you, you just go into the chat box and type the word ready. I'll be watching that. And then myself or Steph will call on you in sequence to provide a comment on a given topic. Then the other function, after we've done a few responses to the prompting questions, just a few, we can then open the floor wide open for Q&A, and you can ask a question either within the two topics we're going to dive into or more broadly as the agenda progresses. So again, with say 10 people at once putting their hands up, the only way we can manage it is through the chat function. So that's how we're going to do it. Either type ready to respond to a prompting question or type your own question in the box and make it as clear and as brief as you can so that we can answer as many questions tonight as possible. I'll just read the questions out in sequence. David will turn to try to answer them, and then we'll move through the questions. And Steph's going to try to watch for redundant questions so we don't do things twice. In terms of guidelines, we have 90 minutes. We want to get through as much as possible. Please watch time. Try not to make repeat comments. You know, the same thing Dave said, I'd like to say, well, we don't really need that. We're trying to gather input for the rest of the process of developing a plan. If you've had a question answered, step back and let others get their questions answered. And otherwise follow the golden rule and treat people on this website as you'd like to in an event as well as possible. And away we go. I hope that's clear. In terms of just some project background, I know this is a busy slide, but to bring everyone to the same point, 10 points of how we got to this town hall discussion. That there's the committee that identified the need for an updated plan, that staff and council supported that, and that together the three groups achieved the grant funding that we're using now. There was phase one research, baseline research and background research completed pre-COVID. And then after that, for the remainder of the project, H&K was selected to support and design and support a good process for engagement and good content development. And we've tried to balance those as going along. Of course, one of the first things we did was we mapped out who we're trying to reach, very broad brush, some focus on underserved audiences like young working families, the contractor audiences, et cetera, and get out the door with lots of good outreach through awareness raising, emails, ads, website development, handout cards, and an ambassador, Kylie, who went out around the community to raise awareness for us. That led to a good participation rate in that long, substantive survey with 14 categories, and we had 185 completions, and the analysis led to a summary of input being circulated, again, to that list of people we'd identified, and we're building an email database over time, thanks to the Bowen Island staffers for working so hard on that, and the committee members as well. In 7, 8, and 9, we really got into the substance after the survey, identifying some topic areas for the plan to focus on, writing very short backgrounders on each to give everyone a common understanding, opening up also a list of cross-cutting priorities that had come from the different sources, things each topic area should try to address, and the plan should try to address. And then we held 5 90-minute focus groups, each online and each covering a specific topic area with people. I think there was between 9 and 20 people participating in each of the focus groups. And we've summarized those results as well. And now we're having a town hall discussion before writing a draft plan over the summer. So you can see all the efforts to raise awareness and gather input and use it to move towards the drafting of a plan. And tonight's session is our last sort of broader public engagement before we go into drafting the plan. And so now I turn it over to my friend David. And David, I'll tab through the slides, but the agenda here is that David will be taking us through a 20-minute discussion on light industrial issues and manufacturing lands, then something similar on strategic and sustainable tourism. And then we go to a wide open Q&A and open sharing of ideas. And they should take us through the next 80 minutes or so. Over to you, David.
Thanks very much. Really appreciate you coming out this evening. And I must say it's been a real pleasure to learn more about Bowen through this process. I don't live on Bowen, but I have long connections with the island. My kids went to Island Pacific School. My son lives in Belterra. My daughter-in-law runs the Bowen Island Flower Shop, and I've hiked many of the trails, but I still have lots to learn about it, and it's been really a great experience to learn about the various aspects of the local economy on Bowen, and to really hold this question of how do we create a sustainable, vibrant economy that works for the residents of Bowen and protects the environment that is so important to Bowen Islanders. So in the course of doing the work that there are a number of topics that we got really good consensus on, but 2 of them, which are key economic sectors, we had opposing views. And so I really wanted one of the key purposes of this session is to drill down on 2 of those where there are conflicting views and see whether we can find some balance. So the first one that I want to talk about is light industrial and manufacturing lands. So in the feedback that we've got, people are saying that this is really important, and the industrial lands are in very great short supply. I've had conversations, for example, with Anna Donnelly at the Bowen Business Center, and she's constantly getting people who want to rent space from her, but she just doesn't have any space to rent for workshop space or anything that would be for light industrial or manufacturing or even storage. So there's a big need identified, but at the same time, people are concerned. They're feeling that industrial activities or manufacturing activities are intrusive and undesirable, and they may also have unacceptable environmental impacts. So my first question to you is, how can we best accommodate and meet the needs of people who are looking for and saying that there's not enough industrial land or manufacturing lands or storage lands? And how can we best accommodate this land use on Bowen Island?
Great prompting question. So anyone who wants to respond to these prompting comments and the first question, just type ready in the chat box and we'll open your mic. Right, Steph? Okay, thank you. We are going to spend 10 to 15 minutes in this topic area. David wants more content, more suggestions, more reflection on this from community members at this point.
There we go.
Okay, so there's a response. Glenn responded, what is driving up prices of land such we don't have the ability to support the prices these activities can sustain? David, I guess that's a comment / problem statement.
Yes, I mean, this is a broader, it's a broader issue for the region. British Columbia and the Lower Mainland and Bowen are all very desirable places to live, and so there's more demand than supply, and so that drives prices up and makes land less affordable. And in the context of light industrial land, there's not that much of it, and what there is, it's expensive because of the prevailing rates. And so it's trying to figure out what's the way that we can thread the needle to find a way to meet these uses in a somewhat affordable way, and still do it in a way that is environmentally responsible. One of the comments that people have made is that because of the lack of light industrial and manufacturing and workshop and storage space, many of these activities are happening in an unauthorized way on people's own properties, and with no way to have oversight or make sure that they are being done in a proper way. And so one of the goals of this is to put these into a proper place where there can be more oversight about that.
Thanks, David. My friend and our colleague DG Blair is now ready to ask a question or respond to your prompting question. Go ahead, DG.
Right. Hi, Vince. Good to see you. So I guess my question or comment is really about maybe getting to David to scope the question a little bit, maybe perhaps a little bit better, because for me, it's really all about scale of what you're asking. So what scale are we talking about to accommodate this land use on Bowen? How much of this sort of land use do we need? And then the second one, I think you were just touching on, but where is it appropriate? So for example, the Grafton Lake Watershed, which is the largest watershed on Bowen, is not an appropriate geographically and ecologically speaking to accommodate this sort of land use. And that covers a lot of Bowen Island. And so I think where I'm getting to is there's very limited opportunity for this type of land use on Bowen. And I think I would argue that there's perhaps not the need for a large scale of this type of land use.
That's a really good comment, and I should have been more specific about it. So the kinds of size of plots or land areas that people are looking for are relatively small, like maybe 1,000 square feet for a warehouse space, or a workshop space might be at the upper end, even 500 or 600 square feet. Now, there are maybe slightly larger areas for storage of vehicles that would be stored outdoors, and where repair work could be done on those vehicles in a proper manner. So I think the sense that I'm getting from people is that they're not looking for large areas, but even a number of small ones would help open up and allow tradespeople to have a workshop space for their particular trade and that kind of thing.
Thanks. We're getting nice comments and questions in the chat now. So a follow-on question to that same is from Richard W. Can you be more specific about this identified need? How representative are the findings around the need? Isn't there a risk that business interest groups are overrepresented in the evaluation?
So in part, as part of the consultation, we did reach out to people to find out who is asking for this space. And it does come from a variety of sources. And so it is often tradespeople who say they cannot operate a certain business because they just don't have the ability to have a workshop space. And so that causes them to not to be able to carry on their business. And the result of that is that business doesn't happen. And so contractors are brought in from off island. And that's at least according to some of the people that we've spoken to who are asked about, can they rent space? Is there space available? There is a very strong consensus that there is a shortage of space, and there's much more demand than there is supply.
Thanks,
and
David.
that one of the implications of the lack of supply is that there are more tradespeople having to come from off island to do certain work. And their belief is that more could be done on island if there were more spaces.
Good points, and there's directly relevant comments building up now. Thanks. We have someone saying, wasn't lot one, the triangle, so this is from Murray, and probably be Liam or Steph to help with the background. Wasn't lot one, the triangle between Mount Gardner Road and Trunk Road, down to the works yard designated for light industrial? Has it been zoned, and has any land been zoned and ready for someone to actually come in and build something for this?
So I'm really glad you asked that question. I don't have the answer to that, but it is one of the questions that I was going to put to the group because there was this community lands forum, and that this lot just where the Grafton Road and the Gardner Road splits off has been identified, and I'm not sure that I'm not certain if there has been anything done about that. But my question to the group is, would that be a suitable place, as it has been identified through an engagement process? It was one of my other questions, what locations would be best for this activity to take place? And I note that the comment about the Grafton Lake Watershed is deemed not an appropriate place. Another one that has been identified is Eddie's Pit, as there is a couple of acres of potential space there. So that's another alternative. And I'd be interested to hear people's thoughts about their feelings about the suitability of that space.
Okay, well, you're prompting a lot of good questions within the 20 minutes we have for this. Michael Nankin says a big part of Bowen culture is the community of sharing and support. There's a need for a workshop for crafters and builders, for example, to have a storage and building space to share tools, supplies, and I'm not sure what that word is. How and where can we create a facility like this and the infrastructure to create a co-op?
Right.
I think that's a stimulative question. We can kick it around. I'm going to jump ahead for just a sec. Alex and Michael are talking about.
Sorry, Rosemary was before Alex.
Yeah, I'm going to get to her.
Sorry.
Just because Alex and Michael both talk about this issue of defining what we mean by light industrial, and why do we assume that it's necessarily environmentally risky, that it could be polluting and harmful? Jewelry, a brewery, studios, farming, vertical farming are all examples of clean industrial uses. We should distinguish the type of use because industrial is automatically associated with carbon polluting businesses. And then again, back on the co-op point, Michael says trade and artists need this kind of space.
Yeah.
Okay, so good comments that
Very
raise
helpful. Very
some
helpful.
considerations going forward. So Rosemary, could you go ahead with your comment or response to one of the questions?
Yeah, so it's a comment. How can we best accommodate this land use on Bowen? So if I hear what you're saying, it's thinking about making land available for uses that we don't currently have land designated for. And Murray brought up the possibility of lot one. I've heard other people mention, can't we spread this in smaller places throughout the island? If we are going to accommodate these different uses spread throughout what are currently residential areas in the island, I believe we need to proactively look at our bylaws. For example, if you look at our noise bylaw, it really is assuming a residential community. You can make noise from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., Monday to Friday, Saturday, Sundays, holidays, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And anything that's required for commercial activities or anything related to operation and maintenance of community service activities, so many things are exemptions, which means you can make noise whenever. So I just really think we need to look at our bylaws and get out ahead so that people aren't living with a concern that next door to them, there's going to be something operating 24/7.
Right.
Thank you.
Great comment. And we have heard from the feedback that keeping these lands, these light industrial manufacturers separate from residential is important to people, and also keeping it separate from a noise, and also in a way that it can be monitored so that the practices, there can be good feeling that there will be good environmental practices for the activities.
So Allison builds on that about understanding that the word, what light versus more risky industrial activities are, and what sort of manufacture would happen. Like refining that and maybe classifying that.
We
Marie,
really are think about sort of trades activities. So something like a small welding workshop, a carpentry workshop, maybe some sort of pipe bending small workshop. Those kinds of things. It's not really about big heavy equipment that people are mostly talking about. Although possibly the storage of that heavy equipment is a need.
So can I jump on the topic of light industrial and the term and use real world examples that are relevant and landscape changing?
who is this?
Jason, I'm on Deer Walk.
Thanks.
So let's use an example. Light industrial is a zone that exists at West 2nd in Vancouver up to Broadway between Cambie and Maine. And it existed for 50 years, well after it was factories, but it was like a territory of saying like, we've got these warehouses. People are going to do exactly that, manufacture with welding or car repair shops. And that happened. In the last 20 years, Mount Pleasant has become known as a location called Mount Pixel because it's now designated as some of the best international locations for doing digital visual effects, animation, and gaming, because the landscape is the right for large format for, before COVID, where you could have 1,000 people on premises and all working on computers. So light industrial shifted from the idea of noise from the welding to the noise of a computer machine.
Right.
And the light industrial is a walk-in, and I know this very well because I've bought property in these areas. I've run companies in these areas, and it was a combination of industry and habitation. So you have people living in the same sector and people working in the same sector. So light industry is like not alarming cost of sound and impact to the world. Now, False Creek itself is toxic, has been for 100 years. That's all getting cleaned up. We've seen that. But the light industrial term is not a concern. I would not be concerned by that term. It's the idea that light industrial actually represents the new digital age, which is just making sure that a house has fiber optics of high speed bandwidth.
Thanks. We've got so many people lined up to speak. I'm just going to jump in and say thank you for that comment. We've got about 5 or 6 more minutes on this topic, and I'm just going to look at the remaining comments. And Rosemary Knight, I believe, is going next. Oh no, Marie Nays. Someone, I believe, Levin talked about the idea, built on the idea of developing a co-op approach to allow different pieces of land to be multiple use, to try to integrate needs instead of separating them. So that's a big move, David, to consider. There are 3 or 4 explanatory and discussion points about Grafton Lake. Someone saying, why be concerned about Grafton Lake? And DG Blair mentioning Eddie's Pit is in Grafton Lake, and that it is the watershed is the supply for the largest water supply district on Bowen, plus many individual drinking water wells. There's some comments about that triangle of land. We don't need to jump into that now. And we can go to the comment from Marie Nays. Thank you. Thanks, Steph.
I think for me, I jumped in a little bit late on the conversation, but I think it's important to take a step back and also look at what does our community want. And some people, many people view Bowen as a bedroom community to Vancouver, and they're not necessarily in a position where they want to have a lot of businesses starting up on Bowen. And then there's also, we're very polarized, I think, when I talk to people in the community. And then there's also those who want to live and work here. And so I think regardless of what outcomes we have with many of the questions, that we're posing tonight, there's a bit of a PR problem. There's going to be the challenge of making sure we represent what our community actually wants. Do we want a bedroom community? Because if so, then your industrial, your people are going to always be coming over from the mainland. And do we even know what the community as a whole wants? And I think that's an important critical factor when we are talking about any of these questions, because if 80% of the community in a poll just says they don't want a community where everybody works and lives on Bowen, they want bedroom community, we're working really hard to achieve something that may not represent what the community wants. And I'm all for it. I happen to love the concept of live and work on Bowen, but not everybody does. And so I think that has to be throughout our whole conversation. I think that's a really important thing to factor in as an economic development committee. What do we actually want as a community?
Thank you, Marie.
We can talk and talk and talk about it, but if our community at the end of the day doesn't want industrial or doesn't want people working from home, it's a stumbling block. So,
thank you. Remaining questions seem to be quite heavily towards definition and communication, David. What is light industrial? What is industrial? What are the risks of it? What falls in it and off of it? What's relevant to Bowen and what's not? So those are helpful comments.
Yeah, one question I would like to get people's feedback on is this idea of boat repair area, which is a light industrial activity that occurs on virtually all other Gulf islands, but doesn't really have a strong presence on Bowen. And so what do people think about the idea of having some ability on against the water, so that boats don't have to be taken out on the land, to do some modest repair and improvement work to those, and have a proper place for that? And is there a suggestion of a proper place for that?
Okay, 3 minutes left on this topic, so jump in, anybody who can answer David's question. Suggestions.
Well, I can jump in and say the Union Steamship Marina has a yard for boat repair, and it's about the only usable launch system on the island. So I guess we're stuck with that.
Okay.
I can also say from Union Steamship that boat repair doesn't typically happen in the water. You sort of suggested, is there somewhere you can do it in the water? It's not really,
Right.
for the most part. You clean your boat, you might do some top things, but if a boat's being repaired, more times than not, it needs hauled out because of engines and prop repair and stuff like that.
Yeah. Fair enough. I did mean just so that you could use a lift to bring it out onto the land right next to it, which is the way.
Right. So that would be a trailer, not a lift. A lift is different. But right now it's all by trailers,
I see.
what we do use.
Okay.
So, anyone else have any comments on that topic? Okay, there's just a final couple comments and we'll move on. So someone has said there's a nice building with Rondi has a nice building at the entrance of Bowen for light industrial. Well done. There's a back and forth about who says we should be a suburb without services versus we want to live on island, and how much do we follow the opinion of the population versus the strategic impact of these different economic policies. So we can't get into that. Let's use this record and the comments for our next steps, David. And everyone, thank you for putting your ideas into the discussion area. We are having a discussion rather than a final decision session tonight. So I'm going to take us into the next topic since we're at 7:35. And yes, I do have a little schedule here to follow. So David, now we're on the responsible tourism one. If we can keep this within 20 minutes, I'll be very surprised, but let's go.
Okay, so this is the second big contentious topic, which probably doesn't surprise anyone on Bowen, that it's obviously an important economic sector, but it also comes with significant impacts because, of course, visitors love to come to Bowen, but the number of tourists can have impacts on the residents and the environment, especially at certain times of the year. And so the question I really want to try to pose to get some feedback on is what kinds of tourism are compatible that could work, so that because there are a number of people that are employed in the tourism sector and are wanting to be able to maintain jobs and what rules can we apply to tourism to minimize negative impacts, recognizing that tourists are going to come here, and how to best manage that.
Okay, thank you for prompting that. Again, if someone's ready to respond versus making a comment versus asking a question, all three are doable using the chat function.
I can jump in a little bit on it.
Okay, and then Michael will follow you. Go ahead.
I think that one of the biggest tourism, as you refer to it, is our friends and relatives of the people that live here on the island. We see that as the largest group of people walking on or driving on with the ferry. They have some contact here and have a reason to be here. The other separate item that you should bring up in this subject is housing. Where do you house people, not so much tourists, but how do you house people that work in the tourist industry? We're extremely short on low cost income housing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Michael, the floor is yours for either a question or a comment.
Thank you so much. I'm on my husband Michael's computer.
Oh, yes.
I'm Liz Mankin, and I am the new chair of Tourism Bowen Island. So I want to thank you to all of you for opening this conversation. Tourism Bowen Island is a nonprofit society that was formed many years ago by a group of Bowen residents. We are your neighbors, as well as Bowen business people. We are your neighbors. We have the same needs and wants that everyone on Bowen Island does. We want smart, conscious, sustainable tourism along with business management. Bowen Island needs tourism. And in many respects, we're all in the tourist industry. We need tourism because it supports our businesses to keep our goods and services at an equitable rate, so our Bowen residents can purchase them and use their services year-round, because everyone has rents to pay. Tourism is very good because we need to have a conversation and a group of people that create a healthy exchange of people that come to Bowen, and not an isolated community. Bowen Island's lands do not belong to Bowen people. It belongs we have so much crown land, it belongs to the people of all over Canada. You know, our parks are under the jurisdiction of Metro Vancouver. And at Tourism Bowen Island, we have a visitor center that our mandate is to help educate and enlighten any visitor, every visitor that walks off that ferry, be it in a car or on foot, as to how to navigate our trails, our waters, how to safely be here, as well as support our businesses.
Okay, I have to ask you to wrap up, please.
Yeah, so I think that when you want to say tourism is year-round, it's needed year-round. It's not a seasonal thing. And that we need to have more of a conversation with the community at large as to help support each other in our wants or needs for our infrastructure, for an environment, for Bowen.
Okay, I saw David take some notes. We've got about 12 people lined up, so thank you for letting me intervene there. Okay, thank you. Either Kathy or Len, you're next.
Well, there is no plan for tourism on Bowen Island. There is no plan to give back to the community, that the people who are not stakeholders. I have no problem with people making money in tourism, but I do have a problem with my taxpayers and the environment taking the hit. The vacation tax, accommodation tax, whatever you want to call it, which is all around the world to help build trails, look after trails, pay for extra bylaw officers, pay for building of toilets, pay for road maintenance from the 21,000 people that come in a couple of months, got turned down by the stakeholders. There is no interest in looking after our community at all.
Thank you for sharing those thoughts and background. Rosemary Knight, you're next.
Yeah, so I think, like in most places in the world, 2% hospitality tax, if we're looking to tourism to be part of our local economy, then this 2% hospitality tax is not necessarily to fund tourism, but to fund the impacts of tourism, so that we can have more public toilets, more garbage collection, more servicing of the visitor center, so that the cost of that is not spread or carried by Bowen taxpayers. So I'm all for a hospitality tax, not to fund tourism directly, but to cover the impact of tourism.
Thank you. There was someone earlier who said, start with public washrooms. That came from Brent O'Malley. Now, there's a comment from Levin Calvert. There are multiple forms and examples of islands managing this business or industry as an attractor instead of a threat. How can we learn from those? The question is the answer. We are looking for tourism that supports both nature and the community. We have to look and allow for forms, governance, and bylaws that support this. Mary Nays writes, off-season promotion to balance out the influx of summertime day trippers who come, use our resources, buy an ice cream, and go back home. So that's to balance it out over the year. Jason Dowdswell mentioned use the Cinque Terre model from Italy, the 5 villages, I think that's known as. Jason, do you have a minute to describe what you mean by the Cinque Terre model?
Thank you. And yes, so my spelling is bad. Cinque Terre is on the west coast of Italy. It is known as a tourist destination for what, Venice is 400 years old as a place to go. This is on the other side of their coastline. And it's this beautiful romantic experience by a goat trail that eventually became a railway that connected 5 cities that were just seafaring cities. And now everyone in the world goes to Cinque Terre. And it's a great place to go. What is unknown, and it's unpublished in every tourist magazine, is that there's another town that is not talked about. And they've kept it secret because they've publicized and marketed this idea. And if you walked the goat trail a little bit further, or if you took the railway a little bit further, you get to the best town on the coastline, because all the citizens work together to say, we'll invite the world, but they ain't getting to us. We're just going to let them go to those trails and those places and let them invite and bring money and celebrate and have a good time. But here is our place, and we're going to be exclusive. And they marketed that idea, and so that exists in Cinque Terre, Italy.
Okay, we'll take a look.
Yeah,
thank you.
Right.
Thank you very much. Kylie Redhead asks, how do we create higher paying jobs in tourism? I'm sure that's not easily solved in this meeting, but let's mark it down as something to think about as part of the strategy. Another comment from Basia regarding many of the tourists being family visitors, which was said earlier as a key subgroup. Kylie is talking about, would like us to move beyond sustainable to responsible tourism, not just minimizing impact, but creating a net positive impact through tourism to the community. Marie Nays, suggests offering packages to tourists to use and pay for our resources. For example, a 3-night rental complete with dinner at Docks, Tuscany, the pub, along with yoga session or an art class or eco-friendly hike. So just more and more ideas pouring in. I think I have 25 messages to get through. Try to set clear boundaries for tourists who come here, outline the limited resources. Many people have no idea about this, so we need to inform them. Alex Dehe says target to the upper echelon, bring in the quality tourists. Less is more, I guess that means. Rob Forbes noting that tourism has been one of the largest economic drivers for the island since 1902. It's not new. Glenn, the housing issue is serious. I don't think we'll be able to support a tourism-based economy without changes to housing policy. We won't be able to support enough restaurants and other tourist services at present rates around housing and wages. We've got several businesses with growing concern they can't stay open because they can't find workers. Levin provides examples from Denmark, Greece, and Costa Rica where tourism supports business, the future of the community, and the relationship with nature. Related to all of this, Kylie says we need to determine the acceptable limits of change for tourism. Richard W. says correction, tourism is not actually needed by everyone. Joel says we are vulnerable to BC ferries. They don't refuse people. Whereas here, ASTBI to help manage tourists, we are a little helpless. I'm not quite sure if I read that right. Now we have Michael Nankin saying ready. So Michael, do you have another comment, or the person who's speaking on behalf of Michael?
Yeah, this is Liz again. I mean, I understand and hear all this. I mean, the needs to support sustainable tourism, aside from business management, we're talking about, and I think that's what happens is that tourists and visitors, aside from our family and friends that come, new people, they need education on how to navigate the trails and the behavior with the ecology, and education of pack and take out your trash, and which has already been in the works with posters and information on the website. You know, we need help from the Muni to help with our infrastructure, with trail maintenance. And trail maintenance is also, under the guise of Metro Vancouver Parks. And we need help from the Muni to buy more and build more bathrooms and more trash receptacles and more trash pickup. I mean, this is an infrastructure that we have to, work and mandate together as a community to help support sustainable tourism.
A couple of comments about being in favor of the hospitality tax, asking how it would apply to Airbnb and short-term rentals. Fred Wagner says Bowen's already busy during the normal summer months, which benefits local businesses on a seasonal basis only. We need to attract people who actually spend money at businesses while on the island. Often individuals do not, who use our recreational environmentally sensitive areas, leave little or no monies on the island. An example is busloads, often 2 or 3 per day at Killarney Lake, of people transported to the island during the summer. So in other words, busloads coming, using the Killarney Lake, leaving without spending anything. We need to also attract visitors year round to support meaningful, non-seasonal, non-minimum wage jobs. I think that means. There's 37 comments. We're not going to get through them all in the next 5 minutes. I'm just going to keep reading them out. Keep looking at infrastructure, bathrooms, routing of ferry traffic. Murray says, in BC, the 2% tax was developed to pay for marketing. It has been legislated that a portion of that can go towards affordable, attainable housing. It does not go towards trails, washrooms, or any infrastructure by provincial legislation. Another comment, Bowen will always be a tourist destination, and applying a tax to enable off-season tourism initiatives and support tourism will be beneficial. Basia, the businesses in the Cove depend on tourism. Thousands of Bowen kids have worked for these businesses over the years to pay for their educations. These businesses also employ general folk, those who are not professionals with university degrees with high-paying jobs, which helps make for a very rounded community, so a mixed employment base. I'm just going to skip around. Murray, limiting the vacation rentals to operating 120 days a year will make us a summer destination. Why would they save some of those days to sell at low rates in the off-season? Okay, I'm looking for questions now. There's a lot of comments. We can take those comments for discussion. Katie Brown has her hand up, so we'll go to Katie.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Katie Brome. I'm here representing the Bowen Island Golf Course, as well as the youth on the island. Basha just mentioned one of my points right now, but I just wanted to step in and say that the tourism industry has really provided jobs for people coming back from university on the island and being able to be housed with their parents and pay for their university. Right now at the golf course, we have 36 people employed, and that gets great support from the community, but also it's really based on the tourism over here. So providing transit and a few other things to just support us over here and the tourism industry goes a long way for these kids who have jobs and are trying to make some money to go back to university.
Yeah. Thanks for your comments.
Thank you.
And I just interject, I see comments going by asking about Destination BC and other initiatives. There is this Rural Islands Economic Partnership that has been working on sort of sustainable tourism strategies and things like creating a responsible code of behavior for visitors and really working to get people to tread lightly and be respectful of when they visit islands like Bowen Island. Another one is to do no promotion during the summer season. You don't need to, but then to focus on if there is any promotion, it's done in the off season, and then encourage longer stays that are not low impact and have a focus on education and wellness and a light footprint.
Thank you. Some additional comments that have been coming in. Murray, one of the retailers, told me this past Saturday is one of the busiest and most profitable days ever, all from tourism. Rosemary said, why should the BIM be paying for support for tourism with taxes from the island? Surely this is the point of a hospitality tax. Jason mentioned water taxi. I'm not sure what that's about. Well, adding one, I guess, expanding it.
Yeah.
Glenn says, I do not think we can simply rely on seducing high value tourists, although someone earlier, no, Emily did say, I agree about having tourism packages for higher end tourism and longer stays to support accommodations, restaurants, and shops. Glenn says, we can't rely simply on seducing high value tourists. Some people on the island will be lower income. We're going to have some lower income tourists. We need to have a more robust strategy. Basia says about people being on the island, not spending the money. Oh, that's not true. I worked at the marina for years, those bus loads, and there are not many of them have spent a lot of money at our gift store, trinkets, ice creams, meals, etc. Okay, Rosemary says, Murray, right now BIM gives Bowen Tourism $20,000 a year. So hospitality tax could cover exactly what that currently covers, freeing up $20K for the toilets, garbage, ferry management issues that we've been talking about. Noticing we have about 2 more minutes
Two minutes
on this topic, and then about 30 minutes for 30 to 35 open discussion. We could promote the fact that we have many amazing shops, galleries, and restaurants, and not just the trails, says Emily. Rosemary Murray says, Rosemary, the 20K is to operate the info center, pays some of the part-time wages.
Murray and I should just talk offline. Stop chatting.
That's great. Thank you for clarifying. Okay. Before we go onwards, David, is there anything you want to say further about what you've heard or what you need to know or what you want to ask next? Because we're going to move into the general Q&A next.
No, let's keep going. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Well, we did a good job. Now it's
Sorry,
an open...
I've just got one more hand up. Is Victoria Jay's
Yes.
iPhone?
Thank you.
Hi, I don't want to take too much more time on this topic, but I've been living on Bowen Island for 2.5 years now. When I first visited Bowen 5 years ago, I came on foot. I came on by boat from Kitsilano, and just as it was off season, and I had just noticed looking at how Bowen used to be laid out. As soon as you would get off the boat, there was a few attractions as soon as you would get off, and places that you could go right off the boat on foot. What I found a little difficult was commuting to some of the locations by foot without quite knowing what there was to see and things like that. So my comment that I mentioned earlier is if we were to talk about developing some bigger infrastructures that are right off island, available for people that are just walking.
Well, it looks like we might have lost you. So, but we did hear your point about creating walkable attractions and making it easier to find and access services and shops near the boat to reduce traffic. I think that's the core of the point. If you want to type anything additional into chat, that'd be helpful. So there's a couple of closing questions on tourism about how much of it, what kind is too much, how do we preserve the community while allowing some contained development? Note about Jody at Tourism Bowen Island working many hours without being paid, a concern about parking. And lastly, I had a side note from Jason Dowdswell, who had to go put his kids to bed, to say, nice event, thank you. And he can talk further offline, but thank you to all for your participation today. Okay, so in terms of what's now on the screen, you can just see that we've listed the topic areas or sectors that will fall within the plan that we're going to discuss and develop further, and also some cross-cutting themes that we're saying those sectors need to pay attention to all of those themes, however it's developed over time. And that's going to be a complex undertaking to write the plan, but right now we have an open 30 minutes for Q&A. I would just ask you to either put your questions in the chat box or to say ready, and then we go to you and you can verbalize your question on any topic that needs input or you're concerned about. Thank you, Basia, for the comment about the good forum. Rosemary, you have the floor for a question or comment.
Great. Just a comment. So first of all, thank you for all you're doing. I think it's great that we are carefully looking at this as a community. One of the concerns I had preparing for the focus group areas, which makes me concerned about the material you're dealing with as you're pulling everything together. I was told that one of the questions was going to be, how does this sector or topic area, I was in the knowledge sector, intersect with the cross-cutting themes of housing, environment, whatever they all are, they're hidden behind my chat. Instead of which, when I got to the focus group, the question changed. And it became, how does this sector positively influence all these cross-cutting themes? Housing, environment, off-island purchasing. So I feel that the focus group, there was this spin that any of this economic development is going to positively impact affordable housing, environmental stewardship, transportation, and commuting. And the opportunity to raise what many of us feel are legitimate concerns that we have to really be aware of and treating with caution, there wasn't even the opportunity for discussion. So my question to you is, why did the focus group emphasis change from a, what is the impact, negative and positive, on these cross-cutting themes to how does this sector positively impact the cross-cutting themes?
Okay, my memory is that we said that out of the analysis of the survey, there were cross-cutting priorities, and we chose the word priority very, very carefully. I actually shouldn't say cross-cutting themes in that slide, I should say priorities, because those are island priorities. Those are things people want addressed. And that's why at the focus group, the question was, in my memory, how could this theme area positively affect these priorities? I don't think it was tell me how it does, it was how could it, because it's a forward-looking plan. And I don't, and people raised many questions and concerns, especially in the tourism one, about the risks of tourism to some of these exact priorities.
I guess my group followed the rules. We focused on how could these positively influence these priorities. And I just feel like it was unfortunate that the question wasn't posed, okay, now how could these negatively impact these priorities? So I felt that there wasn't sufficient opportunity to discuss that. Just my input. Thanks.
Okay, so I've just received a note, and thank you, Rosemary. That's fine. Alexandra has said some here cannot read the slide due to accessibility, which is a good thing to have mentioned. Can someone please read the categories? So yes, I will read them now. So in terms of the economic sectors or topic areas that we've identified, there are on the left of the slide: health and wellness, agriculture and food, strategic tourism, arts and culture, the knowledge sector, and light industry and construction. So we've touched on only two of those tonight, and we chose that on purpose, but those are the other key areas or sectors. In terms of cross-cutting priorities, they are affordable housing, environmental stewardship, transportation and commuting, off-island purchasing, which was also known as economic leakage at one point, training and education, and demonstration projects. So now I'll go back to looking for anybody who is ready to participate with a question or a comment. Again, you can type ready or type your question in the box, and it's any topics open for discussion. And Councillor Nicholson is very kindly typing into the chat box now each of the economic sectors and each of the priority areas. Thank you very much. That's kind of you. So the floor is open. Alexandro sends his thank yous for reading and typing them out.
I can, if no one else has anything
yes,
to comment, the affordable housing is a simple thing to do. The municipality has to either get more people to, they're years behind in housing permits and stuff. They need some help in the municipality and the housing department. That would help a lot. And they also then have to look at rezoning some things that allows people to have a second small house on their site. The other projects are somewhat self-satisfying or self-healing. You have off-island purchasing. Well, you're never going to get a major department store over here, so we'll always have that. We'll always have the Costco's and the Cisco's and the big box stores. we can't compete with that, and we just recognize that.
Thank you. So I do have another question or comment from Richard, and someone asked to go back to the parking issue. But there's also a point here. We can go back to industry, tourism, et cetera. We don't have to just do, so anything on that slide we can cover. So Richard writes, the right businesses have always prospered on the island. When there's an attractive service or product, a business does well. The primary question for any business to consider is location, location, location. The island is a specific location with various constraints, specific constraints. Pick a business that suits Bowen Island. Do not ask Bowen Island to change to suit a specific business. Okay, Brent's comments on parking, as I scroll back up, was, what about parking? We just lost one parking lot. We're about to lose another near the RCMP. Where do people park? Parking in Horseshoe Bay is a nightmare on the weekend, so many are forced to drive over. Kylie adds a related question, David. I'm curious if parking is being considered in creating this plan. So that's why she wanted to go back to that question, make sure we didn't skip it. Any comments on parking as an issue within the transportation commuting question?
We didn't hear it come through very strongly from other sources, but in the context of there is aspects about transportation and commuting. So in the context of that, then it may be able to be addressed in the final plan.
Okay, well, now we've heard it, right? Strongly. Okay, so I see, how is the community plan going to be developed to consider environment and the island community that is not in business with tourism, that is not dependent on tourism? Okay, so that's kind of the $1 million question, isn't it? The idea that you can develop while still maintaining the environment and protecting the different sectors, including residential folk. I think that's a big meta question. Victoria J says, we need to create a more accessible tourist community. The island lacks accessibility for some. So that's yeah, I'll just leave that. Accessibility meaning people who need special mobility or other needs met. Murray asks, does the municipal licensing of all of the grocery delivery companies and the construction workers and suppliers, et cetera, does the municipality license them? If so, that money could go towards the infrastructure needs mentioned above. I don't know if there should be a comment. So I see Steph shaking her head no, that there isn't licensing or funding available for that from direct licenses. Brian Thomas Peter says, and my middle name is Thomas Peter, by the way, that's weird. The cross-cutting themes omit considering the cultural impact on Bowen of tourism and population growth. The assumption is that there is unlimited growth of tourism and population growth to be supported. We might want to question those assumptions, but how? So I guess this is the finite island concern set, and that's certainly not new. I think what we're doing in the strategy is assuming that there's that limit and those concerns, and yet exploring what's possible or needed. And I guess the magic of the strategy is how to find some kind of good balance. David, do you want to speak to that at all?
An incident going on.
That's exactly right. We know that the island is finite, and it's not necessarily a matter of trying to grow it. It's about trying to accommodate it and accommodate it in the best way so that we make the economy more sustainable on Bowen.
Thank you. And then we've got a comment related from Schaefer and Morton about how to contain tourism, where people are numbered and ticketed in order to contain the amount. Are there places where people have gotten in front of such an important situation so it doesn't kill off the health and beauty of the island? So yeah, you're hearing from both sides. Alexandra says, you read my mind. I'm currently chair of our accessibility group. We need to consider in this plan that a more accessible community in the physical disability sense of the world can help drive economic growth. And David, he's typed in his email to talk about that at any time. Oidis, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but you've said ready, so it's over to you.
Oh, you got it right. Thanks. I just have to say, and it's going to be a touchy subject, is ferry rerouting is a major thing on this island in the Cove, and it's been addressed for 30 years since we've been here. And it just keeps putting pushed back and pushed back. And it's part of tourism. It's part of the growth of Bowen Island, of regular people living here. It's a problem in the Cove. And people don't want to look at it because of it might cut down a tree. I don't know how else to say that, but it needs addressed. And Bowen's growing, and tourism is a problem with it, and the growth of Bowen.
Forgive my severe ignorance, but what do you mean by ferry rerouting? The cars or the ferry?
The cars. The cars, how they come off the ferry.
Yes.
Yes. You know, maybe they go in one way and they go down another. Somebody's going to get hit in the ferry lineup or crossing the street at some point if they haven't already. But it's a big problem, and it needs addressed. And nobody wants to deal with it.
Thank you. Alex Sadehi says, would the island be okay with a health and wellness focused resort industry? That alone could solve many of the problems, but I'm afraid many would be against it. DG is ready to make a comment or ask a question.
Yeah, I guess I have a bit of both. You know, my comment is that when I look at all the different economic sectors, like I see, for example, and this is just my opinion, but looking at the knowledge sector in terms of developing good jobs, I think there's a lot more potential for living wage or better than living wage in that sector versus tourism jobs, which there's not a lot of growth there. Sure, they're great for short-term jobs for youth, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't have that. But in terms of a sustainable economy and moving forward, I would think that there would be particular sectors that would be more geared towards having you know, better paying jobs. And so I guess that's my comment. And I think that when I look at the knowledge sector, for example, I think there's it probably has the greatest opportunity for that. When I also look at people working from home, and, you know, somebody previously had mentioned the bandwidth issue. So, you know, that is something that I think we need to look at. So that's my comment. And I guess my question is, how will the plan factor that sort of thing in? That sure, there's all these different economic sectors, but there's certain ones that perhaps when we look at sustainability crossed with all those themes, and for me, a particular one is environmental stewardship. How is the plan going to address that in terms of a prioritization or, you know, a direction or giving direction rather than saying we need all of these, because we need them in different proportions.
Thanks. I have to jump in just to squeeze in more questions. Thank you. David?
Yeah, so I think what we're trying to do is to identify those sectors that will have a bigger impact in terms of creating jobs for residents or improving their economic welfare in some way, and that help to address some of the challenges related to the cross-cutting priorities. And the more that they can address those priorities, and the more that they will be helpful in creating improvements to both the number of jobs, but also the quality of jobs for residents, they will rise up in the priority and in the final plan.
So we have about 15 minutes left. There's 15 more messages. More are going to come in. So I'm just going to start moving through. Some of these are comments, and I'm going to skip them because they're for the record almost. Let's see. I'd be interested to know if placemaking principles will be incorporated into development plans moving forward. This is being implemented to great effect all over Europe, addresses many of the issues and concerns being raised here, including housing, tourism, environment, economic growth and development, transport, sustainability, etc. So the idea of placemaking and space creation, it's a suggestion, David. We can come back to it. There is a comment about showcasing goods and services available on island on the website. a question about why there's money for marketing, but yet not for services to accommodate the crowds that come from the marketing. A comment from Councillor Nicholson, 2 points of information. B&Bs can operate year round. There is not a 120-day restriction. That applies to the rental of whole homes. And number two, building permits are currently backlogged some months, not years. Happy face. Manning says, great forum. My takeaway is there seems to be an island that accommodates all these supposed conflicting ideas and concepts and has all the supposed opponents happy with the outcome. I think it means there could be a Bowen Island to accommodate all of this. There's a lot of common ground on this little rock, and I can see between us all with everyone's thoughtful input here and in earlier iterations of this process. Communication and community input is key, and this is a good step in the right direction. Oh, I'm really glad I read that one out. Victoria J, possibly enhancing programs directing towards our Vancouver native population, so local population, to enhance tourism and community. Marie comments on the problems with the parking and vehicle marshalling. Alejandra says, my accessibility commentary above was skipped. I did read out one and then the other one about following along. Oh, yeah, that was the one about develop an economic plan so that a more accessible community in the physical disability sense of the world can help drive economic growth. I'm skimming down. Victoria says, I agree, creating a sustainable community for on-islanders should be a priority. Murray says, without a plan that is being developed, and thank you for such a great forum, we are getting well on our way to becoming West Vancouver Light. Is that what we really want for our island? Emily Kaplan, as a business owner and artist, I see the value of tourism and depend on it. As a homeowner, I worry about the environmental impact of people camping, fires, littering, not respecting the land, or supporting the local economy. Promoting more off-season tourism with yoga, wellness retreats, creative retreats, weddings could help. Glenn, you have the floor for a question or comment.
Yeah, thank you. And I've been holding off on commenting because I'm having trouble wrapping my head around the 20-minute comment that I can communicate. But just looking at circling back to tourism, because it is a big issue for a lot of people, and looking at your list of economic sectors, and it's listed as strategic tourism, where really as an economic sector, it's tourism. So I think the word strategic was put in almost as an appeasement to the fact that we're looking at ways to minimize the impact of tourism. But I think it's important to define what strategic tourism or tourism management means to our community, because you ask different people, you're going to get different impressions of what they think that means. Tourism management to someone who's tourism friendly might think it's figuring out a way to manage people when they arrive here and deal with that, where tourism management to someone who is against tourism is figuring out ways to turn people away, and that's what it comes down to. So I think for us, we need to figure out, are we attracting tourists? Are we trying to deter tourists? For us, I think it's to try to deter tourists is kind of like trying to hold back the tide for us. We're well behind the 8 ball. I've only been here for a short 10 years, but in that time period, I've seen tourism explode in a way that we are not prepared for it. And we have a fantastic group of people with tourism Bowen Island. They're all volunteers. They do their best with limited funds. We have a municipality who's young and to a certain degree is not able to support them financially. And it all comes down to money. How do we do washrooms? How do we deal with the hordes of people that do come here? It comes down to money. And I think we need to really focus in on how do we get a structure in place that we can do that. The turning down of the hospitality tax was a huge mistake. Limiting accommodations to 120 days was a huge mistake. These are things that we need to take a step back and relook at. And we also need to really clearly define for the community, what does strategic tourism and tourism management mean in order for them to comment on it.
Thanks, Glenn. There's a couple relevant comments in the chat box that build on that, David, from Schaefer and Morton. Has the planning process to date included a weighting of the relative benefits of the 6 sectors of key topics? We see tourism here, but are other sectors actually responsible for greater economic and ecological benefits? So I guess that's something we're going to have to grapple with in the development of the strategies, how to balance and focus these things long term. Fred Wagner, a complementary point. Once the plans are finalized, it will be important to know and communicate what metrics will be used and tracked. What milestones are we setting? and what are the KPMs, the key performance measures around that. I'm not sure how far the plan can go in detailing that, given the scope of it, but that's a request. Alejandro mentions that in earlier stages, he feels that the 3 registered Bowen Island nonprofits in the accessibility and wellness space were left out of seeking comment. And I think we did broad brush right to everybody, try to reach everybody, invite everybody, outreach, and I think your groups were probably on the list, but we take your comment as important. Thank you. Marie commented, excellent to Glenn. Nick asked, what is the meaning of demonstration projects in our list of cross-cutting priorities, David? Where did that come up and what does it exactly mean?
I think it came from the idea to showcase sustainable initiatives in there, and that it's creating a form of tourism that's more education oriented. So it's people coming and seeing efforts to showcase certain sustainable initiatives that are being pursued on the island, and having demonstrations so that it's possible for people visiting to actually see them and learn from them.
Okay, thank you. So that's an example of a demonstration project that's visible and that builds skills and that might benefit the island in multiple ways. Victoria J says, Bowen is always a tourist destination. So to me, tourism management is leveling out the tourism throughout the year to create a net beneficial financial gain while also considering day-to-day living for islanders. So the issue of balance and limits and benefits versus costs is clearly going to be part of this planning exercise. Michael Natkin writes, we cannot deter tourism. We are globally recognized as a place to visit. We are closest to Metro Vancouver. We need to thus embrace environmental mandates as well as smart growth and continue to educate visitors. And it's interesting, the comment by Glenn, I think about 10 years ago, things were a certain way. Well, I remember going up to Squamish to hike the Chief 10 years ago, nobody was there. And now if you don't go before 6:30 in the morning, it's a lineup. So the region has boomed and you're feeling part of it is my perspective on that. Any other comments, David? Any questions, any things that have come up for you from all this rich input?
Yeah, no, it's all helpful to get any comments and insights. What I'm really keen to hear is if people have an idea that they think this would materially help make the economy more sustainable and vibrant on Bowen, and if you have some specific suggestions, I would be keen to hear it. I will say that in the Citizen Lab, people have contributed some comments, and here are some examples of ones that I heard that I think would be interesting to share, and people can write in the chat whether they like these ideas. Someone heard a comment about a community-owned internet service provider for Bowen. Another one was the idea of having a commercial kitchen where food entrepreneurs can rent space and can make their salsas and chutneys and be able to do that and possibly sell it on the island. Another idea was a co-working space with basic business services. And I did hear the comment about more public washrooms in the Cove and at beaches. Another one was an outdoor band shell with grass seating for intimate performances. And this idea of small knowledge-based or culture-based festivals and events, and focusing on those not instead of things that are big. Another one that I heard about was from the Citizen Lab feedback was an art wall where rotating artists can express themselves. So for a period of time, their artwork is there, and then it gets covered over, and other artists come and be able to express themselves on this art wall. And another final idea that was a high-end modular home park, sort of to improve affordable housing for seniors. So those kinds of creative ideas that we've heard. And any other ideas that you've got like that I'd love to hear about those.
That was a quick and good list, David.
I hear this comment about the circular economy, and very keen about the circular economy and how we could have that expressed. One of the ideas that we've talked about is the idea of deconstructing homes on Bowen instead of having them be demolished if they're taken down, and salvaging the wood and being able to use it on Bowen, and having it be a more affordable wood supply, for example.
Nice. And there was one other big idea floated while you were talking about the other ones from
Great.
citizens, which we are reviewing. Marie Nays wrote, my big idea for arts and culture is to create an art campus on Bowen where teachers of all types of art can run classes and workshops and have affordable space.
Yeah, that is great. Thanks. And Victoria Jay's got her hand up.
Hi, sorry, my internet is being dodgy, so I don't know if my comment went through, but being somebody who loves sports, and it was a lifeguard and played soccer, and I felt that having a community center that was able to have a pool, a hockey space, a basketball court could help Bowen be more inclusive in the sporting activities, instead of all the youth having to commute off island to go to do all their games in other locations. That would create a nice location here for people to come year round, and for us to be, help our athletic islanders grow and prosper.
Great. We have Sat for the next person to speak.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks everyone for the wonderful comments. I've just kind of been sitting back, really just trying to digest it all, to be honest. And it's really neat to hear the different perspectives. I guess one thing I wanted to add, I am a business owner on the island, and looking at the economic sectors and thinking about, the reality of it is in the time that I've moved to Bowen, which has only been about 8 years now, property prices have over doubled. The cost of construction is probably in a similar ballpark. And the reason I mention that is, I think a lot of us, and myself included, to be honest, when I think about economic sectors on the island, I think about sort of more of a smaller mom and pop type operation. And that's definitely true for a lot of the businesses that exist on the island. That's true of our business. But I think I look ahead and I think, okay, well, how are we going to, or how are we going to attract more health and wellness businesses, or agriculture? Let's say agriculture is a big one. I grew up in a farming family on the valley. I cannot afford to buy a farm and make any money on it. And that's true here. I mean, we just saw a beautiful property on Bowen, agricultural land that sold for quite a large sum of money, and that's not a criticism at all by me. That's just a reality. And so here we are. We're trying to support, or want to support, these different economic sectors. I guess what I'm trying to say is there's a significant economic barrier for new people to come in and do this on our island, and we need to recognize that. And the reality is, if some of this happens, like let's just say another retreat center, I am an owner of Nectar Yoga retreat center on Bowen, so another retreat center on the island. I mean, the reality of it is it's most likely going to be an investment, a group of investors or a corporation run in a different manner with a different purpose and volition. And I think we're going to be, that's just, it's just I guess a general comment. And it's a kind of, unfortunately, another challenge as a community that we're going to face. We're going to see a different type of business owner coming to the island to invest than we've been used to.
Thank you. We're just a couple minutes from the end of our time. I'm scrolling back. There's a series of comments, examples, other jurisdictions to look at. A comment that Bowen should really have a mobile home park, or a manufactured home park, not just for seniors, but also for workers. Talking about what do we mean by strategic tourism? And now another 4 questions have come in. The housing crisis isn't just chasing away new companies. It's so much cheaper to own housing elsewhere. Many of us get a raise just by moving, losing people, and getting to a different kind of mix of people on the island. David, I'm going to leave it to you to provide any final comments. We're finishing in 2 minutes We have the notes from this to transcribe and use as inputs to what we're going to, and folding that together with Citizen Lab, focus groups, survey, lots of material and research and interviews.
Yeah.
So any final comments before we wrap?
No, I just really want to thank everyone for providing the feedback. It's all really, really helpful. I mean, it all comes together with all the different forms of engagement that we've had over the past number of months, and we're really going to try to. My job is to then pick out the big themes and the ones that sort of that sort of work at addressing multiple issues and have co-benefits for addressing things that relate to the cross-cutting themes and cross-cutting priorities. And we will put out a brief summary of the engagement in the second half of July. And then we'll be working on creating the draft of the plan to share with the committee there shortly thereafter. So thanks everyone. Really appreciate all the comments, and I will go through all of the chat and read it carefully and organize it and add it to the other comments that we've got and try to capture as many of those ideas as possible.
Thank you, Steph and Liam, for all the help to get this going, and Councillor Nicholson as well. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you so much, everyone.
All right, appreciate it.
Okay, team. Congratulations. That went as smoothly.
Okay, we still have some people here.
Oh, do we? Well, only comment was it seemed to go smoothly. We'll just let everybody sign off and then do our debrief. Thanks for hitting the record button, by the way, Steph.